The hooves of Gabriella's horse echoed like funeral drums on the cobblestone path winding through the forest, each step dragging her closer to a fate she had never chosen. The veil pinned into her dark curls fluttered in the breeze, too delicate for the sharp bite in the late afternoon air. Her hands trembled slightly in white gloves as she clutched the reins. The carriage behind her, filled with ornate trunks and gifts from her father's estate, seemed like a mobile tomb carrying the last remnants of her freedom. She had no love for Lord Cedric. Their engagement had been a political arrangement sealed with the clink of goblets between men, not hearts. And now, escorted by a handful of guards indifferent to her misery, she rode toward her wedding like a lamb dressed for the slaughter. When the attack came, it was swift. Screams pierced the silence as crossbow bolts rained down from the trees. Gabriella's horse reared, nearly throwing her as bandits poured from the shadows, their faces wrapped in cloth, their swords gleaming with intent. Her guards fell quickly, unprepared, outnumbered. She was pulled from her saddle with brutal hands, the earth cold against her back as one of them snarled something about ransom. Her mind spun. Her chest heaved. She was powerless. The clash of steel interrupted her spiraling thoughts. A rider surged into the chaos, cloaked in black, sword already dripping with blood. The figure moved like a shadow with purpose, cutting down one bandit, then another, until only silence and corpses remained. Gabriella barely breathed as the knight turned toward her. Every inch of the figure screamed danger and command, the armor scratched, the cape torn, the helmet reflecting the dying sun like a mirror to her soul. Gabriella scrambled to her feet, heart pounding, as the knight stepped closer. "Are you hurt?" The voice was low, rough with adrenaline. She shook her head. "And no, I thank you. You saved." The knight raised gauntlet hands to the helmet and lifted it off. A tumble of dark blonde hair fell around a face smeared with dirt and blood. High cheekbones. Piercing eyes. A woman. Gabriella's words caught in her throat. The world tilted. Her rescuer was no ordinary knight. She was beautiful, unapologetically female. And something in Gabriella's chest shifted, cracked. The knight held her gaze. "Name's Natalie. You shouldn't be out here alone." Gabriella blinked. "I wasn't, but now I suppose I am." Natalie's eyes scanned the wreckage, then returned to Gabriella, softer now, almost amused. "Not anymore." She offered her hand, strong and sure. Gabriella took it without thinking. The moment their palms touched, something passed between them. A spark, electric and unspoken. The wind whispered through the trees like a secret. Neither of them pulled away. Gabriella followed Natalie through the underbrush, her skirts snagging on thorns and twigs as twilight bled into the sky above them. The path, if it could even be called that, wound deeper into the forest, away from the road, away from the wreckage, away from the only life Gabriella had ever known. Her heart hadn't slowed since the moment Natalie removed her helmet. Every time Gabriella looked at her, something inside her twisted. She didn't know what disturbed her more. The violence of the rescue or the quiet heat she now felt every time their eyes met. "You're sure they won't come back?" Gabriella asked, trying to keep pace, her voice lower now in the dim light. "They will," Natalie said simply, not looking back. "Bandits don't like losing, especially not to a woman." Gabriella stumbled slightly. "So, you're used to this? Fighting? Killing?" Natalie stopped. Slowly, she turned, her eyes catching the last of the golden light. "Would you rather be dead?" The question wasn't cruel. It was a challenge. Gabriella opened her mouth to respond, but found no words. She looked away. "No," she said finally. "I just didn't expect a woman in armor." Natalie's tone was unreadable. Gabriella met her gaze. "Yes." Natalie took a step closer, and though her expression was stoic, her eyes burned. "Neither do most people. That's why I keep the helmet on." "But you took it off for me." Gabriella hadn't meant for it to sound so intimate, but there it was, hanging in the cool air between them. Natalie's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned again and kept walking. Gabriella followed, but her mind was racing faster than her feet. The forest thickened, shadows crawling like silent ghosts between the trees. By the time Natalie stopped in a clearing, a small abandoned hunter's lodge barely visible in the gloom, Gabriella's legs were aching and her shoes soaked. "We'll rest here tonight," Natalie said, pushing the creaky door open and checking the inside with quick, practiced movements. "It's not much, but it's shelter." Gabriella stepped inside, shivering. The interior was rough but dry. An old fireplace stood against one wall, blackened with soot. Natalie dropped her bag and started building a fire, her movements efficient, quiet. Gabriella sat on a wooden bench, watching her. "Do you always travel alone?" "I prefer it," Natalie replied without looking up. "People ask too many questions." "And you don't like answering them?" "No," Gabriella smiled faintly. "That sounds lonely." Natalie glanced at her, pausing for a moment. "It's safer that way." The fire crackled to life between them, throwing warm light onto Natalie's face. Gabriella studied her quietly, the strength in her arms, the faint scar on her jaw, the way her fingers trembled just barely once the task was done. "You saved me," Gabriella said softly. "Why?" Natalie exhaled slowly, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. "Because you were about to be someone's property. And you looked like you didn't want to be." Gabriella blinked. "How could you know that?" "Because I know that look. I wore it once too." Silence stretched between them. Gabriella's throat tightened. She was supposed to be sleeping in a silk canopy bed by now, preparing to become a wife to a man who barely knew her name. Instead, she was here, in a forest with a woman who had killed for her, who wore armor like skin and secrets like a second soul. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Natalie met her eyes. "Now we keep moving. Cedric will send men after you when he finds out you never arrived. And if those bandits realize who you are, they'll come too, for ransom or revenge. Either way, you're not safe." Gabriella wrapped her arms around herself. "And you? Are you safe?" A pause. Then Natalie smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I haven't been safe since I was 15. "What happened?" Natalie shook her head. "Another question. Another answer you won't give?" Natalie's gaze hardened. "Not tonight." Gabriella stood and moved to sit beside her near the fire. The warmth between them shifted, more than just heat from the flames. Their shoulders brushed. Neither moved. "You could have just left me there," Gabriella said, watching the flames. "Let them take me. Let me disappear into whatever fate was planned for me." "I don't leave people behind," Natalie replied. "Not anymore." "Why not?" Natalie's eyes flicked to her. "Because someone once left me, and I swore I'd never do the same." Gabriella turned to face her fully. "I don't know who you are, Natalie, or where you came from, but you didn't have to save me. You didn't have to carry me out of that chaos. And yet here we are." "Here we are," Natalie echoed, voice low. Their eyes locked. The firelight danced between them, shadows curling like whispered promises. Something hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Gabriella reached out, just barely, and brushed a loose strand of hair behind Natalie's ear. Her fingers lingered against the warm skin of her cheek. Natalie tensed, but didn't pull away. "Why did you really take off your helmet?" Gabriella asked, her voice softer than the flames. Natalie's breath hitched. "Because I wanted you to see me. All of me. Just once." The silence after was thunderous. Then footsteps outside. Quick. Heavy. Gabriella froze. Natalie was already on her feet, sword drawn, eyes sharp. She moved to the door silently, signaling Gabriella to stay behind. The footsteps grew louder, closer. The fire crackled. A branch snapped. Then voices. Male. Armed. Searching. Gabriella's heart slammed against her ribs. Natalie looked back at her only once, and in her eyes was not fear, but fury. Whoever was out there had made a mistake. And they were about to learn that this night did not need saving, but would damn well protect what she'd chosen to save. Gabriella didn't have time to scream. One moment she was standing near the hearth, watching Natalie's back tense with alertness, and the next she felt the pressure of a hand over her mouth and the cold kiss of steel against her throat. Rough arms pulled her backward through the door before she could react. The fire's light vanished, replaced by moonlit chaos. She struggled, kicked, bit down on the hand, but another figure appeared, striking her temple with something hard and unrelenting. Darkness surged at the edges of her vision as the forest spun, trees like towering specters above her. The last thing she heard before blacking out was her own heartbeat and Natalie's voice calling her name, sharp and enraged. When Gabriella came to, her head throbbed like a war drum. Her hands were bound, her gown torn, her hair loose around her face. The cold ground beneath her told her they were no longer in the clearing. She blinked hard, trying to see through the haze. 3 men stood around her, one sharpening a blade, another rifling through her belongings, and the third watching her with a predator's patience. "You're worth gold, my lady," one sneered. "But I wonder, are you worth more breathing or screaming?" Gabriella recoiled, ball rising in her throat. She'd always known men like these existed, lurking in stories told to frighten noble daughters, but now she was their prey, and no story could save her. But Natalie could. She would. Please, gods, let her come. Somewhere deep in the forest, a bird startled into flight. Then another. The man with the knife paused, listening. "Did you hear that?" he muttered. "It's nothing," said the other. "The woods are always." His words were cut short by the soft whistle of something slicing the air. An arrow buried itself in his throat. He gurgled and dropped without a sound. The clearing exploded into panic. Gabriella ducked as steel clashed with steel, as Natalie charged from the darkness, like a phantom of fury. She moved like lightning, sword gleaming, eyes blazing, her body a blur of violence and grace. One man lunged at her. She ducked, spun, and drove her blade through his stomach, not even stopping to watch him fall. The last bandit grabbed Gabriella and pressed his dagger to her neck. "Drop it, knight," he spat. "Or I open her throat." Natalie froze, chest heaving, blood dripping from her gauntlet. Her eyes locked on Gabriella's. "Let her go," she said, voice low, deadly.
"Now."
The man laughed, pressing the blade harder against Gabriella's skin. "You think I won't?" "No," Natalie said, and there was something terrifying in her calm. "I think you'll be dead before your blade reaches bone." And then she moved. Gabriella didn't even see the knife leave Natalie's hand, only felt the man's grip loosen as he gasped, staring down at the hilt now embedded in his chest. He staggered, dropped his weapon, and collapsed at her feet. Gabriella sank to the ground, shaking, her breath catching in her throat as Natalie rushed to her side. "Gabriella," she whispered, kneeling, her hands trembling as she cut the ropes. "Gods, are you hurt?" "Did he?" "I'm fine," Gabriella choked, though she was anything but. Her body was whole, yes, but inside, she was cracking, unraveling. Natalie pulled her into her arms, holding her like she was something fragile and precious all at once. "I should have protected you. I let them take you." You came," Gabriella whispered against her shoulder. "That's all that matters." They stayed like that, wrapped in silence, the only sound the wind in the leaves and the dying breaths of men who'd made one fatal mistake. When Natalie finally pulled back, her hands cupped Gabriella's face gently, reverently. "I thought I lost you," she said, voice raw. "And I didn't realize until it happened just how much that would destroy me." Gabriella's breath hitched. The fire that had been building between them finally ignited into something unstoppable. "You didn't lose me," she whispered. "I'm right here." And then their lips met. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tentative. It was desperate, fierce, the kiss of 2 women who had survived fire and blood and fear only to find each other in the ashes. Gabriella clung to Natalie's armor, feeling the heat of her beneath the cold metal, the taste of danger and salvation on her tongue. Natalie's hands wove into her hair, grounding her, holding her like she might vanish again. For a moment, the forest disappeared. The fear, the blood, the path ahead, All of it faded beneath the blaze of that kiss. When they finally broke apart, breathless and shaken, Gabriella rested her forehead against Natalie's. "What do we do now?" she asked. Natalie closed her eyes. "We run. Together. Where? Anywhere. As long as I have you." A faint smile ghosted across Gabriella's lips. "Then let's not waste a second more." Natalie helped her up, their fingers lacing together without hesitation. The knight's armor was streaked with blood, but her eyes were clear, focused. Love what you've seen so far and want to help me keep creating these awesome stories on this channel? Then subscribe and hit the bell. Your subscription supports the channel and makes sure you get more exciting stories. Alive in a way Gabriella hadn't seen before. They disappeared into the night once more, but this time, not as strangers. This time, hearts had been laid bare. And now, the world would either bow before their love or burn trying to stop it. The village was little more than a scattering of cottages tucked between wild hills and endless forest, a place so small it likely hadn't seen a noble in decades, let alone one barefoot and bruised with a knight at her side. They arrived before dawn, just as the fog was curling over the rooftops like a sleeping breath. Gabriella clung to Natalie's hand as they walked through the narrow path between houses, the knight's black cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders to hide the bloodstains on her dress. Her legs ached, her body throbbed with exhaustion, but her heart was something else entirely. Ever since Natalie's lips had touched hers, Gabriella hadn't been able to stop remembering. The warmth, the fury, the need. It hadn't been delicate. It had been alive. And now every step they took together felt heavier with what had changed between them. They found shelter with an old healer woman named Myria, who knew Natalie from years ago, though Natalie gave no explanation for how, only a brief nod and a handful of coins. Myria accepted the silence with the same ease that she handed them keys to a small guest house behind her garden. "You'll be safe here," she said, "but not forever." Gabriella didn't ask what that meant. She already knew. Word would spread. The roads weren't safe, the trees whispered too much, and someone, be it Cedric or the Crown, would come looking. But for now they had walls, a roof, and the first chance to breathe. The guest house was small but clean, a single room with a narrow bed, a hearth, and a table pressed against the window. Gabriella touched the worn wood of the windowsill and tried not to think about how far she'd fallen from velvet drapes and marble floors, or how she didn't want to go back. Natalie remained quiet as she peeled off her armor, piece by piece, the clinks echoing in the silence. Gabriella watched her, unable to look away. The sight of Natalie stripped of her metal skin, still strong, still sharp, but undeniably human, made something ache deep inside her. When Natalie glanced up and saw her staring, Gabriella didn't look away. "You don't speak much," Gabriella said. "Is that by choice or habit?" "Both," Natalie replied, pulling her hair back with a leather tie. "Speaking means explaining. Explaining means trusting. And trust gets you killed." "But you trust me," Gabriella said, and it wasn't a question. Natalie met her gaze. "I shouldn't. But you do." A long pause. Then, finally, Natalie nodded once. "Yes, I do." Gabriella stepped closer. "Then tell me something real. Anything. I want to know who you are when you're not saving me." Natalie hesitated. Her hands clenched at her sides. "I was born in the southern provinces," she said slowly. "My father was a blacksmith. My mother died young. I used to watch soldiers ride past our village and wish I could follow them. I wanted to be more than invisible." "So you ran away?" "I disguised myself as a boy," Natalie said. 12 years old. I joined a unit heading north. No one looked too closely. I fought. I learned. I bled. And I became exactly what I'd always dreamed of. A knight. Only they never knew I wasn't who I said I was. Gabriella exhaled softly. "How long did you keep the lie?" "Until the day I met you." Silence stretched again, but this time it was full of understanding, of weight, of something unspoken curling tighter between them. Gabriella reached up and touched Natalie's face gently. You've been alone a long time. Yes. You're not anymore. Natalie closed her eyes, like the words physically struck her. Then, without warning, she pulled Gabriella into her arms. Not like a knight saving a lady, but like a woman falling apart in the only place that had ever felt safe. Gabriella wrapped her arms around her, letting herself melt into the embrace. I can't stop thinking about that kiss, she whispered against Natalie's collarbone. Me neither, Natalie breathed. It changed everything. Then why do you look like you regret it? Natalie pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Because I don't know if I can protect you from what comes next. I don't need protection. I need you. That was all it took. Their lips met again, slower this time, but no less intense. Natalie's hands gripped her waist, Gabriella's fingers tangled in her hair, and the kiss deepened into something that burned brighter than any fire. But just as Gabriella started to lose herself in the heat of Natalie's mouth, a knock shattered the moment. Natalie broke away instantly, sword already in hand before Gabriella could catch her breath. Myria's voice came through the door, urgent. Riders at the main road. They're asking about a missing noblewoman. They have a royal seal. Gabriella's blood ran cold. Natalie didn't flinch. She turned to Gabriella, her eyes sharp and unreadable. You said you didn't want to go back. Now's the moment to prove it. What are you saying? I can get us out, Natalie said. But if we leave, there's no undoing it. You'll be hunted, branded, disowned, maybe worse. Gabriella looked at the door, then back at Natalie. Her heart pounded. I'm already lost to them, she said. But I found something else. Someone else. She reached for Natalie's hand and squeezed it. I choose you. And for the second time, without hesitation, Natalie chose her back. They fled before the sun had fully risen, slipping through the back fields of the village with packs hastily strapped across their shoulders and urgency pulsing in every step. Natalie led the way, blade drawn, eyes constantly scanning the tree line, every muscle in her body taut like a drawn bow. Gabriella followed close, still in the borrowed cloak that hid her fine silks, her fingers still tingling from where they had last clutched Natalie's hand. They had kissed again in the dark just before leaving, not out of passion, but out of promise, a silent vow sealed in breath and lips that they would not be separated, no matter what waited beyond the edge of the forest. But promises didn't stop arrows. They didn't silence hounds. They didn't erase names from royal decrees. And as they moved deeper into the dense woods, the sound of hoofbeats echoed behind them, like the past refusing to die. How many? Gabriella whispered, out of breath, her voice trembling. 6 riders. 2 hounds. No scouts, Natalie answered without looking back. They're not tracking carefully. They don't expect us to fight. Are we going to? Natalie's jaw tightened. If we have to. They moved faster. The forest closed around them, darker, wetter, more treacherous. Roots clawed at Gabriella's boots, branches tore at her dress. Her lungs burned. She had never run this hard, never been this hunted. The weight of her name, Lady Gabriella of House Varentel, dragged at her like chains. She wasn't meant to flee through forests or hide beneath bloodied cloaks. But she also wasn't meant to marry Lord Cedric. She wasn't meant to die a quiet death inside the golden prison her father built. She was meant for something else. Something wild. Something real. Someone like Natalie. They reached a ravine just as the barking grew louder. Natalie turned sharply, scanning the terrain. The slope was steep, slick with moss and mud, the river below fast and angry. We can climb down, she said. Or I can hold them off here while you run. No, Gabriella snapped. We do this together. Or not at all. For a heartbeat, Natalie looked at her as if she were both a miracle and a curse. Then she nodded once and grabbed Gabriella's hand. Stay close. They slid down the slope, half running, half falling. Gabriella stumbled more than once, but Natalie never let her go. The moment they hit the riverbank, they ran again, boots splashing through shallow water until the trees opened into a glade. And there, waiting like a nightmare, stood a man in silver armor. Natalie Viral, he said, his voice sharp and cold. By order of the crown, you are to surrender immediately. Natalie halted, pulling Gabriella behind her. Her hand went to her sword. Don't do this, Jareth. The man, Jareth, removed his helmet. He was older, maybe mid-30s, with gray at his temples and a scar that bisected his left brow. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Gabriella. You took her. She came willingly. She's a noblewoman. You're a traitor. She's mine, Natalie said, and the words echoed like thunder through the trees. Jareth's face darkened. Do you know what they'll do to you for this? I stopped caring a long time ago. Then you're a fool. Maybe, Natalie said, drawing her sword. But I'm not letting you take her. He moved fast. Natalie moved faster. Steel clashed in a furious rhythm, sparks flying, boots tearing up the earth as they circled each other. Gabriella backed away, eyes wide, heart slamming as she watched Natalie fight like a woman possessed, not for glory, not for honor, but for her. Every blow Jareth landed, Natalie answered with fire. Every time she faltered, Gabriella wanted to scream. But Natalie didn't fall. She bled. She staggered. But she didn't fall. With a final cry, she disarmed Jareth and slammed the hilt of her sword against his jaw. He crumpled. She didn't kill him. Gabriella didn't know if it was mercy or weakness, but it didn't matter. Natalie turned, blood running down her temple, and Gabriella rushed to her. You're hurt. I'm fine, she said through clenched teeth. We need to move. But he'll follow. Not today. Natalie grabbed Gabriella's hand and pulled her back into the trees, but something had shifted. The look in Natalie's eyes wasn't just fear. It was recognition. You knew him, Gabriella said breathlessly as they ran. Jareth. He knew your name. He trained me, Natalie said. He was the first to know I wasn't who I claimed to be. He kept my secret once, but not anymore. Why would he betray you? Because he believes in the law, even when the law is wrong. They didn't stop until they reached a small cave hidden by vines. Natalie collapsed inside, breathing hard. Gabriella followed, kneeling beside her. Let me help, she said, pulling out the cloth Myria had given them. She pressed it to Natalie's wound, gently, her fingers trembling. You saved me again. I always will, Natalie said, eyes half-lidded. Even if it kills me. Don't say that. It's true. No, Gabriella whispered. Because if you die, I'll die too. Natalie looked at her then, really looked, and Gabriella leaned in. Their lips met again, slower this time, full of grief and gratitude, and everything left unsaid. They kissed like the world outside didn't exist, like the only truth was the press of lips, the taste of each other, the heat of shared breath. When they parted, Gabriella pressed her forehead to Natalie's. We need a plan. We need a miracle, Natalie muttered. Then let's make one. You still have a price on your head, Natalie said. And I'm not done being hunted. Not by a long shot. Then let them come, Gabriella said, her voice steel. Because I'm not running from love. Not again. The path into the mountains was brutal, sharp, winding, unwelcoming. And yet, Gabriella felt freer with each step away from the crown, from Cedric, from the weight of her family's name. Beside her, Natalie moved with familiar purpose, though her wound from the fight with Jareth hadn't stopped bleeding completely. She never complained. She never slowed. Gabriella had to keep up. They climbed until the air thinned, until clouds dipped low enough to kiss their skin, until the trees turned to stone and silence. Here, the world seemed forgotten, untouched by royal banners or noble blood, as if it had peeled itself away from the kingdom and chosen exile. Natalie said nothing for most of the journey. Her gaze was distant, guarded. Gabriella knew she was calculating, planning, probably wondering how long they had before Jareth or someone worse came after them again. When they reached the outpost hidden in the cliffside, Gabriella could hardly believe it existed. A village carved into stone, its people dressed in furs and leathers, their eyes wary and sharp. Outlaws. Survivors. The forgotten. They were met by a woman with a gray braid down her back and a wolf tattoo stretching across her throat. "Natalie Viral," she said flatly. "Still breathing, I see." "Barely," Natalie muttered. "We need shelter. Just for a few days." The woman's gaze flicked to Gabriella, to her silk dress beneath the cloak, her clean hands, her eyes too bright for this place. "You brought a noble." "I brought someone worth protecting," Natalie said. The woman spat into the dirt, but stepped aside. 3 days. No promises after that. Their temporary home was a cave dwelling tucked into the mountainside, with a fur-padded bed, a fire pit, and little else. The cold settled into their bones fast, but Natalie built a fire, and Gabriella helped, trying not to let her hands shake too much. That night, wrapped in shared blankets beneath the sound of howling wind, Gabriella stared at the rock ceiling above them. "What's this place called?" "No name," Natalie murmured beside her. "No laws. Just survival." "You've stayed here before." "Yes." "When?" Natalie hesitated. "After I deserted the army. Before I learned how to hide in plain sight. I spent a year here." "You never told me that." "There's a lot I haven't told you." Gabriella turned to face her, only inches between them in the small bed. "Then tell me now." Natalie looked at her for a long moment. "I've killed more men than I can remember. I've lied to commanders, seduced barons, forged letters from nobles to survive. I've stood beside kings and watched them spill blood in the name of honor, knowing they'd kill me if they knew who I was beneath the armor. I don't regret leaving. I regret how many years I gave them." Gabriella's throat tightened. "They never deserved you." "No," Natalie said quietly. "But you do." The words hit harder than Gabriella expected. She reached up and brushed her fingers down Natalie's cheek, across the fresh scar forming near her temple. "I'm not the same girl you rescued on the road. I know. Would you still save me now, knowing what it would cost?" "Every time," Natalie whispered, and then kissed her. It was slower now, not frantic like before, but deep, aching with the truth of everything they hadn't said aloud. That they were in too deep. That this wasn't lust or gratitude or adrenaline. That this was becoming something dangerous. Something real. They stayed like that for hours, wrapped in each other, warmth fighting off the cold of stone and fear. But the next morning, the danger found them. Gabriella woke to raised voices outside. She scrambled from the blankets and moved to the narrow window carved into the rock. She saw riders, 3 of them, wearing the crest of House Varentel. Her crest. Her father's colors. One of them shouted, "Return Lady Gabriella to us, and no blood will be spilled." Natalie was already dressed, blade in hand, eyes blazing. Gabriella grabbed her arm. "They're my father's men. Then they'll kill me and drag you back to Cedric's bed. I won't go with them. They won't give you the choice." Outside, the mountain dwellers had gathered, silent, watchful, weapons in hand but not yet raised. The woman with the wolf tattoo looked at Natalie through the smoke. "You brought this trouble. You end it." Natalie's grip tightened on the hilt of her sword. "Gabriella," she said low, "stay here. If anything happens—" "No," Gabriella said, stepping in front of her. "You don't fight for me. We fight together." Natalie's eyes met hers. Something broke behind them. "You're not a fighter." "Then teach me," Gabriella whispered. "Because I'd rather bleed beside you than be caged again." Outside, the soldiers drew their swords. "You have until the count of 10. Gabriella turned, heart thundering. "What if I talk to them? What if I tell them I'm not going back?" "It won't matter," Natalie said. "You're a possession in their eyes. Not a voice. Not a soul." "Then let's give them a reason to listen." She pulled the cloak off her shoulders, revealing her dress, torn, dirted, blood-stained. She stepped out into the cold air, unarmed, unshielded. The soldiers looked stunned. One of them called her name. "Lady Gabriella, I am not yours," she shouted, loud enough for the cliffs to echo. "And I will not return to a life I never chose. Your father demands your return. My father sold me like cattle. He has no claim over me." One of them moved forward. Natalie stepped between them instantly, blade drawn. "Touch her," she said, "and I'll show you what happens to men who mistake obedience for love." A moment of tense silence. Then the mountain dwellers moved, bows raised, knives gleaming. Outnumbered, and now visibly afraid, the soldiers backed away. "This isn't over," one of them spat. "No," Natalie said, voice cold as stone. "It isn't." They rode off. Slowly. Defeated for now. Back inside, Gabriella collapsed into Natalie's arms, breath trembling. "I didn't know I could do that." "You didn't have to." "Yes," Gabriella said, looking into her eyes. "I did. Because if I let them take me once, they'll never stop." Natalie pressed her forehead to hers. "You were brilliant." "I was terrified. And still brilliant." Gabriella closed her eyes. "We can't stay here." "No. Where will we go?" "North. Past the border. There are lands that don't answer to the crown. Places where two women can vanish. And if I never see my father again, then we'll build something he can never touch." They left that night, under the stars, with nothing but hope and each other. Behind them, the mountain whispered secrets. Ahead of them, the unknown waited. But in Gabriella's heart, there was no more doubt. She had chosen her path, and she would walk it hand in hand with the knight who had changed everything. The cold hit like a blade. Sharp, merciless, unrelenting. Snow fell in thick sheets, swallowing the world around them, transforming every tree into a ghost and every sound into silence. Gabriella had never known cold like this. So complete it seeped into her bones, her breath turning to crystals, her hands trembling even beneath layers of stolen wool. They had been traveling for 4 days, moving steadily north, away from all that was familiar, toward the edge of the kingdom. Natalie had said the border would be marked by a range of black pines and a frozen river that stretched wider than a battlefield. But all Gabriella could see now was white. White sky, white earth, white death. Natalie walked ahead, wrapped in her long cloak, one hand on the hilt of her sword, the other gripping the reins of the horse they shared. She'd let Gabriella ride since the second day, refusing to admit how much her own body was slowing, how the wound from Jareth's blade still burned under the bandages. Gabriella tried not to worry. But worry was constant now. Worry was a companion as much as Natalie was. That night, they found a half-collapsed hunting lodge deep in the forest, its roof sagging under the weight of snow, the door nearly frozen shut. Natalie broke it open with the pommel of her sword. Inside was darkness and silence, and shelter. Barely. Gabriella helped gather what they could for a fire, her fingers numb, her breath shallow. "We can't keep going like this," she said at last, her voice hoarse from the cold. "You're wound. The snow. We're not going to make it." "We will," Natalie said, crouched near the hearth. "We're close." "How close?" 2 days, maybe less." "And what happens if they catch us before that?" Natalie looked up. There was something tired in her eyes, not fear, not weakness, but a weariness Gabriella had never seen before. "Then I'll die buying you the time to escape." Gabriella crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed her hand. "Don't say that. It's the truth." "Then I don't want it. I want you alive. I want us to survive. Both of us." Natalie was silent. The fire crackled between them. Snow howled against the door. And slowly, Gabriella lowered herself to sit beside her. Their hands stayed clasped. "Tell me something," Gabriella whispered. "Anything. Something to keep the cold away." Natalie hesitated, then spoke, voice soft. "There was a girl. Years ago. She knew me before I wore the armor. Before the lies." Gabriella's breath caught. "What happened?" "She was kind. Soft. She kissed me once, in a barn full of hay and candlelight. I thought it meant something. And it didn't. It meant shame. For her." She cried. "She said it was wrong. She left the next day and never looked back." Gabriella stared at her. "You never told anyone?" "Who could I tell? In the army? In the kingdom?" "But you told me." Natalie nodded. Because you didn't run when I took off the helmet. You looked at me like I was something worth saving. Gabriella leaned in slowly, her forehead touching Natalie's. You are. Their hands tightened together. Neither kissed. Neither spoke. They just sat in the fire's glow, breathing as one, while the storm raged outside. The next day, the snow worsened. They were forced to stop by midday, taking shelter beneath a cliffside overhang. Gabriella built a small fire while Natalie scouted the area, though it was clear she was limping more. When she returned, her face was pale. There's someone watching us. Gabriella's blood went cold. How do you know? Tracks fresh. Deliberate. Could it be a hunter? Could be worse. That night, Gabriella barely slept. Every noise became a threat. Every shadow moved. At dawn, they were confronted. A man stepped from the trees, alone, cloaked in furs, a bough slung across his back. His eyes locked on Natalie. Didn't expect to see you again, he said, voice low. Natalie's breath hitched. Rohan. Still wearing stolen armor? He asked. Still pretending to be something you're not? Gabriella stood quickly. Who is he? He served with me, Natalie said. Before I deserted. He knows everything. And now? Rohan looked at Gabriella. Now I'm wondering what the bounty on your little pet here might be worth. Natalie drew her sword before Gabriella could blink. Don't. Easy, Rohan said. I didn't say I'd do it. I said I was wondering. You always were a coward, she spat. And you were always a liar, he replied. But I suppose we both made it out alive, didn't we? The tension was razor thin. But then, slowly, Rohan lowered his hood. You helped me once. Back in Varen Hollow. You remember? You were wounded, Natalie said. Left for dead. You dragged me out. He looked at Gabriella again. I don't care who she is. If she matters to you, then go. I won't stop you. Natalie didn't relax until he disappeared into the trees. Gabriella's knees gave out, and she collapsed onto the snow. What just happened? A debt, Natalie said. Paid. They moved again the next morning. Slower now, weaker, but closer. Gabriella could feel it in her chest, freedom. It was real. It was possible. And yet, as they crossed the frozen lake that marked the border, a single thought echoed louder than all the rest. They weren't safe yet, but they were together. And that would always be enough. The snow was behind them. The river had been crossed. And the moment Gabriella and Natalie stepped onto foreign soil, it should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like holding one's breath underwater. Survival, yes, but never peace. They arrived in the border town of Hailrest with little more than cloaks on their backs and calluses on their hands. It was a crooked, wind-battered settlement built into the cliffs, where the language was rougher and the law more flexible. Smugglers, traders, mercenaries, and exiles passed through like ghosts, and no one asked too many questions as long as you kept your head down and your coin steady. That suited them just fine. Natalie introduced them as two sisters from the Southern Isles who'd lost their family to war. The lie was simple, clean. She found them shelter with an old innkeeper who'd once served in the Royal Navy and hated anything with a crown. He rented them a room above his tavern, small, drafty, but theirs. Gabriella helped in the kitchen to earn their keep. Natalie worked the stables, tending horses like she'd been born for it. They kept their heads down, eyes low. But no matter how far they ran, they couldn't outrun what was growing between them. At night, they shared the same narrow bed, their bodies pressed together not out of need, but because neither of them could sleep otherwise. Gabriella would fall asleep with Natalie's arm around her waist and wake with her nose against Natalie's neck, breathing the steady rhythm of someone who no longer felt like a stranger. There were no kisses those first few nights. Only silence. Only presence. Only hearts that beat too loudly in the dark. And it should have been enough. But nothing gold stays hidden. The rumors started small. A noble woman missing from the southern provinces. A traitorous knight who wore a man's armor. A bounty offered by House Varentel, dead or alive. Then one evening, as Gabriella carried plates through the tavern, she heard it. They say she ran off with a woman. Can you believe that? One man laughed, his breath thick with ale. A lady, choosing a knight over a lord. Madness. Maybe the knight was better in battle, another cackled. Gabriella's grip on the plates tightened. Her heart raced. She dropped them onto a table and retreated to the kitchen, hands shaking. Natalie found her there moments later, the door swinging behind her. "You heard," Gabriella whispered. "Yes." "What do we do?" "We stay calm. No one knows it's us. Not yet. But they're getting closer. The story's spreading. Then we stay ahead of it," Natalie said. "We keep our heads down, save enough coin, and disappear again." "Where?" Gabriella asked, voice barely holding together. "How many times can we run before there's nowhere left to go?" Natalie stepped closer. "As many times as it takes. And if one day you get tired of running, then I'll build us a place no one can find." Gabriella wanted to believe her. She wanted to bury herself in the warmth of those promises and pretend the world outside didn't exist. But that night, the world came to their door. Gabriella woke to voices downstairs, louder than usual, tense. She slipped from the bed quietly, moving toward the window that overlooked the street. A carriage had arrived. A fine one, dark green with silver wheels. She knew those colors. Her stomach dropped. "Natalie," she whispered, panic rising. "Someone from Varentel is here." Natalie was already up, sword in hand. "Stay here." "No," Gabriella grabbed her wrist. "You don't go alone." Together, they crept down the back stairs, hiding behind the inn's storage wall. The front door creaked open. Boots echoed on the floorboards. Then a voice, smooth and measured. "I'm looking for someone. A young woman, noble-born. Disappeared a few months ago en route to her wedding. You may have seen her, traveling with a female knight." The innkeeper snorted. "We get a lot of travelers here, stranger. This one would be memorable. Her name is Gabriella Varentel." Silence. Gabriella felt her blood turn to ice. The voice continued. "Tell me, please. I'd hate to make this unpleasant." Natalie pressed closer to the wall. Gabriella couldn't breathe. Then the innkeeper spoke again. "I think I'd remember a name like that. Now, if you'll excuse me." "She's upstairs," another voice cut in. "Young. Uncertain. A girl. One of the barmaids." Gabriella's heart dropped. "I saw them. I didn't know it was her until you said the name, but she matches the description." Natalie's hand went to her belt. "We have to move. Now." But it was too late. The front door opened again, and footsteps came up the stairs. Gabriella grabbed Natalie's hand and ran, bolting through the back hall, through the kitchen, out the servants' entrance into the dark alley behind the inn. Shouts erupted inside. The sound of boots following. They ran. Natalie led them through twisting alleys and narrow streets, cutting through snow-covered markets and silent yards. But they weren't fast enough. Behind them, a voice rose above the chase. "Gabriella, please, wait." Gabriella froze mid-step. She knew that voice. She turned slowly. A figure emerged from the shadows. Cloaked. Familiar. His face came into view, and the past hit her like a fist to the ribs. "Alaric," she whispered. Her childhood friend. Her cousin. The only person in her family who had ever shown her kindness. "You're here? I begged your father to let me find you," he said. "To talk to you before anyone else did. Gabriella, please. You don't have to run anymore." "You don't understand," she said. "I do," he said. "I know about her." His gaze flicked to Natalie. "And I know what they'll do if they catch you both. But I can help. I can get you out of here." Natalie stepped between them. "You expect us to trust you? I expect you to love her enough to do what's necessary to keep her alive." Silence fell. Wind howled between the buildings. Gabriella's heart pounded. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you deserve a life that's yours," Alaric said. "Not one built for your father's politics." Natalie looked at Gabriella, eyes searching. Gabriella nodded. "We go," she said. "But only if we stay together." Alaric didn't argue. "Then follow me. Before someone else finds you first." They followed Alaric through the frozen city beneath moonlight, cutting through narrow alleyways and silent courtyards until the streets gave way to stone steps carved into the side of a cliff. At the top stood an abandoned observatory, its once grand dome half collapsed, the glass shattered and rimmed with frost. It looked forgotten, empty. But when Alaric knocked 4 times against the old iron door, it opened from within. Gabriella and Natalie were led into a hidden sanctuary, warm, lit by firelight and lanterns, stocked with crates, documents, forged seals, clothing. It was a haven for those who had vanished from the world by choice or necessity. "It belongs to a man I trust," Alaric said. "He owes me more than one favor. You'll be safe here for a while." Gabriella felt her shoulders finally begin to lower. Natalie's presence beside her remained steady, her hand never far from the hilt of her sword. They'd survived assassins, soldiers, hunger, snow, and now this. Safety felt like a foreign concept. That night, they sat in a corner of the observatory near the fire. Gabriella wrapped in a dark cloak that smelled of cedar and smoke, Natalie beside her, sharpening her blade more out of habit than need. "Do you trust him?" Gabriella asked softly. Alaric. "Yes." Natalie paused. "I trust that he loves you. That's why I'm still here." Gabriella looked at her. "And you? Do you still trust me?" Natalie didn't answer right away. "I don't just trust you," she said eventually. "I follow you, even if it kills me." Gabriella reached for her hand, twining their fingers slowly. "I would never let them take you. Not even if the price was everything." Those words echoed louder than either of them realized. Because the very next morning that price was offered, Gabriella was called into one of the observatory's lower chambers by Alaric. He stood beside a man dressed in royal black, tall, composed, a seal pinned to his chest. The crest of the crown. Gabriella froze. "What is this?" "This," the man said calmly, "is an opportunity." "For what?" "A pardon. For you. And for her." Gabriella's pulse roared in her ears. "What kind of pardon?" "You return home. Alone. You'll be restored to your family, and your name will be cleared of shame. Your father is prepared to forgive this episode, so long as you renounce your connection to the night." "And Natalie?" The man was silent. Alaric wouldn't meet her gaze. "No," Gabriella said immediately. "Absolutely not. Your refusal will lead to her execution if caught," the man said. "But if you cooperate, she disappears. Quietly. No hunt, no bounty. She lives elsewhere, but far from you. You want me to walk away from her?" Gabriella said, her voice shaking. "You want me to pretend none of this ever happened?" "You're a Varentel," the man said. "You belong to a world that doesn't forgive disobedience. This is your only path to freedom that doesn't end in blood." "You're wrong," she said. "You think love is weakness. But it's the only reason I'm still breathing." She turned to Alaric. "Did you know this would happen?" "They reached out after I found you," he admitted. "I didn't want to tell you unless I had to." "Well, now you have to." Her voice cracked. "Because I would rather live hunted in the wilds than live a single day safe without her." She stormed out before anyone could say more. When she found Natalie, the night was by the window, watching the sea of clouds above the cliffs. Gabriella walked straight into her arms. "They offered me your life," she said. Natalie tensed. "And I chose you." Silence. "Then they'll never stop." "Then let them chase ghosts. Because I'm not leaving your side." Natalie held her tighter. "I don't deserve you. You deserve everything." The next hours passed in quiet urgency. Alaric helped them secure new names, new papers. He arranged for a boat to take them farther north, into lands untouched by royal hands. "You still have family in Varentel," he said as he handed Gabriella the seal that would let them pass checkpoints if needed. "But I know better than anyone. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty." Gabriella hugged him tight. "Thank you for choosing me." "Just promise me one thing," he said. "That you'll keep choosing yourself too." She promised. Before they left, Gabriella and Natalie returned to the tower one last time. It was nearly dawn. The stars had begun to fade. "Are you ready?" Natalie asked. Gabriella looked at her. This woman who had changed her life, defied an empire, and kissed her like it was the only language that ever mattered. I've never been more ready. And then they stepped into the wind once more, together. The sea was dark and endless beneath them, the stars 1,000 distant fires above. The ship rocked gently as it cut through northern waters, far from the laws of kings and the silence of snow-covered forests. For the first time in weeks, Gabriella let herself hope. The night was cold, but her hands were warm in Natalie's. They stood at the edge of the deck, wrapped in their cloaks, watching the horizon slowly open into a new world. One without crowns. One without chains. One they would build themselves. Do you think they'll stop searching for us? Gabriella asked quietly, her voice carried by the salt wind. No, Natalie said. But they'll lose interest eventually, when they realize we won't be found. Gabriella nodded. Good. Let them lose us. I never belonged to that world anyway. Natalie turned toward her, brushing a loose strand of hair from Gabriella's cheek. You belong to yourself. You just didn't know it yet. And now I do, Gabriella whispered. Because of you. Natalie didn't answer. She just leaned in and kissed her, soft, steady, a kiss not of goodbye or desperation, but of truth. And for a moment, everything held still. Then footsteps. Heavy. Rushed. A crewman appeared from the shadows, face pale. My ladies, he said in a low voice. There's a second ship approaching from the south. It's flying no colors. Natalie's expression hardened instantly. How long? Half an hour. Maybe less. Captain? Below deck. He sent me to warn you. Gabriella stepped forward. A second ship? Natalie's hand was already on her sword. No colors means they don't want to be seen. And that never means anything good. They moved quickly, down into the ship's lower levels, where the true captain, an old contact of Alaric, was already shouting orders. We've no cannons. And I'm not sacrificing my crew for nobility. We're not nobility, Natalie snapped. We're just trying to get free. But then another voice rose behind them. Come. I see. Unfamiliar. I'm afraid freedom isn't yours to claim. A man stepped from the shadows, dressed in black, his cloak lined with silver. On his chest, a pin, the mark of the king's secret council. Natalie drew her sword instantly, but it was too late. From behind, more men emerged, blades drawn, crossbows raised. Gabriella backed into Natalie's side. Who are you? The one sent to retrieve the kingdom's most valuable fugitives, the man said, smiling. And make no mistake, Lady Gabriella, you were never meant to disappear. Not with her. I'm not going back, Gabriella said. You can't force me. Oh, we won't, the man replied. We'll simply separate you. One of you returns. One of you vanishes. Natalie stepped forward, blade raised. Try it. You think this ship is yours? He scoffed. Your captain was bought. Cheaply, I might add. But just then another voice. Was he? The real captain appeared from the upper deck, pistol in hand. And he wasn't alone. Several crewmen stood behind him, armed and furious. You thought you could buy my ship? He said. I don't sell to traitors. Especially not ones that lie to my face. The room erupted. The traitors were outnumbered, outmaneuvered. Natalie fought like a storm, cutting down the first man who charged. Gabriella grabbed a dagger from the table and held it steady, defending their corner. Chaos. Blood. Cries. Until only the leader remained. Bleeding. Cornered. Desperate. He lunged for Gabriella. And Natalie moved faster than she ever had. She slammed him to the wall, her blade at his throat. You don't touch her, she growled. Not now. Not ever. You'll never stop running, he hissed. They'll find you again. Then let them. Natalie pushed the blade deeper. And the next time they try, I won't let anyone live to tell the story. The man collapsed. Unconscious. Defeated. It was over. The crew tied up the survivors and tossed the worst overboard. The rest were imprisoned in the ship's brig. And when the sun finally rose over the horizon, Gabriella and Natalie stood together again, bloodied, breathless, but whole. "You are ready to die for me," Gabriella said softly. "And you are ready to fight for me," Natalie replied. "I never thought I'd see that. I learned from the best." "You never needed me to teach you," Natalie said. "You just needed someone to believe you could be free." They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Gabriella reached into her coat and pulled something out, the seal of House Varentel, the symbol of her birth, her name, her old life. She tossed it into the sea. "That was never who I was." "And who are you now?" Natalie asked. Gabriella turned to her. "Yours." That night, when the stars returned and the ship sailed into the far northern waters, they lay together under the open sky. Gabriella's head rested against Natalie's shoulder, their hands linked, breath rising in quiet rhythm. There were no more kingdoms to fear, no more fathers to obey, no more masks to wear. Only two women, scarred and changed and reborn by each other's love, and the promise of a life they would shape with their own hands. Together, always. Thank you so much for being here and for believing in this channel. If you feel in your heart, you can donate with super thanks so I can focus more and more on this project. Your support helps me keep creating these love stories and bringing them to life for you. See you in the next video.